I think it is the beginning of the really global civil war. Not one nation against the other nation as in the Westphalian system, but something totally new. The civil war between globalists and their enemies on the global scale. The only way to avoid it, I think, now it is election of Trump. So the only man who can save the humanity of this uncontrolled escalation is Donald Trump, because that, I think, it is the leader that we still respect in the West and with whom we could really coordinate, with whom we can make a bargain and in whom we could trust. And that is why the globalists now try to eliminate this possibility. So I think to be or not to be, now it is Trump or not to Trump. So something like that. So otherwise, if Biden, not because of his individual capacities, but because of the groups that are behind him, so if Biden will still represent the West, so I think the Third World War, nuclear world war, is inevitable somehow.
Pepe, do you think Trump is the person who can save the West from calamity and help avoid World War III, or is he not up to that task?
Well, I beg to disagree, respectfully. No, not really. He's a pragmatist. He doesn't know much about international relations, not to mention he doesn't know anything about Eurasia as a whole and the reconfiguration of Eurasia. It depends on his relationship. It will depend on his relationship with the deep state, which will be, of course, a total war against him, because the deep state won't be renewed with the election of Trump. The usual suspects will continue to be there, especially CIA, Department of State, as you know well. So the thing is, Trump, no Trump, post-Trump, or an outsider, they simply cannot understand the way international relations are being reconfigured today. To start with, geoeconomically. They, for instance, it would take them 2 days at the St. Petersburg Forum to see which way the wind is blowing. You saw only a few Americans, and they were all dissidents. Nobody from an official position. Europeans, the same thing. I'll give you an example. There was a fascinating session on the Greater Eurasia Partnership, which is a Russian concept. First outlined by President Putin, and then Sergei Karaganov more or less conceptualized it. On the table, we had Sergei Glaziev talking about geoeconomics, Russian ministers, the former Austrian foreign minister Karin Neisel talking a little bit about the decline of Europe, and guess who? The Taliban Minister of Labor on the same table talking about integrating Afghanistan into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is something that is... Look, even for us who follow Eurasia, was something really mind-boggling. And after that, the Russians were, working the room with the Taliban delegation, presenting them to, people from everywhere, from Persian Gulf, from Siberia, from China, from India, etc. This is just an illustration of how things are progressing so fast here. You had in St. Petersburg sessions on the Northern Silk Road, which is going to be the alternative to the Suez Canal. You had sessions on the International North-South Transportation Corridor, which will be the alternative Russia, Iran, Persian Gulf, Mumbai in India. You had sessions on the integration between the Eurasian Economic Union and ASEAN, Southeast Asia. And all that in one day. So the amount of information and the amount of interconnections is so enormous that even people who live in the region strive to keep up. Imagine on the other side of the Atlantic. They have no idea what's going on. They're totally lost. They only have a plan B, which is more sanctions, more threats. and more escalation, which is what they're trying to do with Russia now. And with Trump, this is not going to change much because he will be under pressure all the time. So there will be more threats, but against China, more against China than against Russia.
And maybe Iran as well.
And there will be much more escalation vis-a-vis Iran, because this is, for Republicans, this is a bête noire. Completely. They're still obsessed with Iran. And the Republican neocons are more obsessed with Iran than the Democrat neocons. The Democrat neocons are obsessed with Russia, essentially.
So, Alexander Gerich, I guess I want to continue on the theme with Trump a little bit, because, you know, listening to what Pepe said, I remember what Comrade Stalin once said, personnel determine everything. And so even if Trump were to come to office and he were to rediscover his internal Richard Nixon, someone who has ideas, someone who has a clear vision of what he wants, wouldn't it be really difficult for him to find like-minded people who are capable of completely overhauling a degraded and, you know, demented American political system?
So, first of all, if we consider the only possibility, the isolated possibility to shift the aggression from Russia to China or to Iran, we are already have de-escalated everything, because now we are on the edge of the full-scale strategic nuclear war. And if they will stop that, if Trump will stop this kind of escalation, humanity has already gained the time. Because the conflict, possible ongoing future conflict about Taiwan with China is one thing. Hardening relations between Iran and Israel, or the force of resistance in Middle East and Israel, is another thing. And the nuclear war today or tomorrow is something totally different. Trump comes to power, the immediate threat of total annihilation of the humanity is put aside. It is not totally abandoned, it is not totally overcome, but it is at least put aside. Second, I think that imagine Trump wins. Deep state, American deep state, immediately understands that his first coming to power was not just joke, just a kind of something unusual. So there is a tendency in the American society to refuse the globalist agenda in the political way. So deep state, who is based on the pragmatic interests and not by some fanatic ideas about destruction of the humanity in order to impose by power so-called open society, and that is not the case of deep state. They don't bother about open society. They are in charge to make America prosperous, powerful, independent, sovereign, hegemonic, yes, but they have nothing to do with this agenda of the swamp of globalists. And they will immediately remark that Trump was something much more than exception. That is tendency. And if Trump and Trumpism is tendency and not just isolated case, so they will shift their attitude and they will arrive to the acceptance sooner or later of multipolarity in spite of them. Not because they understand that very well, but they will be obliged to deal and to operate, to think in terms of multipolarity. That is, as Pepe has explained, is already here. It is not something invented. It is something that is already in the reality, but the globalists fanatics don't want to perceive it, to observe it, to accept it. And third level, I think the power of Trump consists, in fact, to have no group around him. So he is absolutely narcissistic individualism, and that is his power, because everybody the most people in American political establishment is corrupted. Democratic, Republican, neocons, corrupted by one or other form. So Trump relies on himself, and that is a good thing. So he's something more than just marionette, the puppet put by this or that lobby. He is himself. He represents the lost American formula, the lost archetype. So be yourself, go ahead, rely on yourself, and you will win. So that is the great, almost forgotten narrative of American history, American society. And it has in itself the great archetypal power. So I believe in Trump as totally isolated person, but he is as well businessman. If you propose to businessmen to sacrifice humanity for some abstract ideal of global liberal democracy, gay marriages, artificial intelligence, and feminist politics, the businessman would answer, if I do that, I will lose everything. It is not rational. I will not gain, I will lose. And I think this purely pragmatic, materialist, businessman way of making politics today is the only solution. It's salvation for the humanity. We need Trump. It is not the gift. It is not something that could give us the way. He has no mission, except one mission, to save humanity from American rotten globalist elite. But that is that is catatonic mission in the American reality.